Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome once again to those who have just joined us. It's wonderful to be with you and for you to be joining us with a special book launch of Catch Us the Foxes, which is being called the new Aussie cult thriller. So we're very excited to welcome Nicola West and Yana Contogiannis in conversation this evening for Avid Reader. I'd like to start tonight's event just by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands of which I'm Zooming from this evening, the Yagara and Turrbal people, and I pay my deep respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I acknowledge that this has always been and will always be Aboriginal land, a place of community, creativity and storytelling. And so I will be introducing, first of all, Yana. A moment. Yana Contogiannis is the events coordinator at Avid Reader. She recently finished her master's degree in writing, editing and publishing at the University of Queensland and has a background in communications and public relations. She loves crime and mystery books and apparently read Catch Us the Foxes in one weekend. So, and I certainly am looking forward to reading Nicola's book as well. Just a very quick Zoom rundown if you haven't joined us on Zoom before. So what's going to happen is you'll have the chat function and I'll be communicating through that to send you some information about where you can purchase Nicola's book this evening. And if you have any questions, I'll let you know once we're going to the Q&A. If you are tweeting, we are at Avid Reader 4101. And I think that's all I need to cover for us to have as much time in the room with Nicola and Yana and to enjoy this evening's conversation about Catch Us the Foxes. I'll pass over to you now, Yana.
Thanks, Bianca. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on Zoom. My solidarity goes out to everyone who's in lockdown, especially for joining us from New South Wales and also Melbourne now. Well, not just yet, but maybe from 8 p.m, I think. And firstly, a thank you to everyone for your support for booksellers and authors during this time. Everything makes a difference. Every time you buy a book, attend a launch like this, follow an author on social media, or even borrow a book from a library, everything helps. Please continue to shop small during this time and support local businesses who don't want to colonize the moon. Now, I'm so excited to be chatting about one of the strongest debuts of the year, in my opinion. Catch Us the Foxes has been described as Twin Peaks meets The Dry and is a twisted tale that unravels in a small town. Before we jump into the nitty gritty, I'd like to briefly introduce Nicola West, and then I'd love for her to give us an outline of this deliciously dark story. So Nicola is the daughter of a third-generation police officer and grew up in a bucolic coastal town in New South Wales. After moving to Sydney to pursue a career in journalism, she vowed to be as far removed from both her hometown and her father's profession as possible. That is, until she found herself writing a novel about both topics. In addition to being one of 8 young writers chosen to take part in Express Media's 2018 Toolkits fiction program, Nicola was also selected for the Australian Society of Authors 2019 Award Mentorship Program. She was a mentee of best-selling author Monica McInerney. So Nicola, are you able to share with us the premise of Catch Us the Foxes?
Yep, I will. And hello to everybody who's joined us. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. This is Catch Us the Foxes, and Catch Us the Foxes is a gripping psychological thriller set in the bucolic coastal town I grew up in. And it's about a young journalist who makes a gruesome discovery at the town's annual show. And she has to decide if she wants to help keep a dark family secret or break the biggest story of her career.
And as Bianca said, I devoured this book in a weekend. Has such a tight plot and it is very twisty, and it's not so much of a whodunit, but kind of what the hell is happening, just like it is with Twin Peaks. So I do want to start off talking about the setting because I think it's so integral to this book and the story. And so from what I understand, the book you initially set out to write wasn't actually Catch Us the Foxes, but it was a memoir. And now I've gotten distracted before, but never so distracted that I ended up writing a totally different book. So how did you go from writing a memoir to writing a thriller?
Well, I wish it was just distraction, but I always wanted to be a fiction writer. That was what I was the most passionate about. But I knew that as a young author, with just no discernible author platform whatsoever, that it would be tremendously difficult to, get a book published based on nothing. So I worked as a journalist, and I had dabbled in a bit of personal essay writing and stuff like that about some stuff that happened in my life, which was that I had some quite serious medical problems in my teens and early 20s. And I'd written about them, and I'd received wonderful, wonderful feedback about my writing for them. So I ultimately ended up deciding doing the Faber Academy's Writing True Stories course with Patty Miller, which is absolutely incredible. And it's actually very strange, but through that course, it actually gave me the confidence in my writing enough that I was like, this isn't what I want to be doing. I want to, pursue the thing that I was most passionate about, which was writing this weird, twisted psychological thriller that was, in the vein of Twin Peaks. But it was just when I was writing about the memoir stuff, obviously it was quite a confronting topic for me to be dredging up all that stuff again, but it was honestly just like pulling teeth. It was horrible. And I did promise Patty that one day I would finish the memoir, and I've gone back and forth over that. But I think now I don't know if I could sit down and write it in this day, because just in stark contrast, the experience of writing fiction has just been a pure joy in comparison, and effortless. It just feels effortless, and it feels fun, and I enjoy it so much. So having to go back to what it essentially feels like pulling teeth just isn't the most appealing thing, I guess, at the moment. But yeah, that was, and why it ended up being Catches the Foxes specifically was that just by, sorry, I'm just gonna have a drink. Just by sheer coincidence, at the end of the Faber Academy, my apartment ended up being really badly flooded by a sprinkler 2 stories up, and I had to move out for quite a while. So I had to move back into my parents' house in this small coastal town that I grew up in, which is Kiama. And I didn't want to do that because that was dredging up a lot of quite complex memories for me, because I was also trying to write this memoir at the same time, which was about my experience of, fighting for my right to receive a medically necessary hysterectomy, especially in this small town that people had a lot of thoughts and judgments about me fighting for that. So I was trapped back in there. And the only thing that I sort of found solace in at the time was the 3rd season of Twin Peaks, which I'm utterly obsessed with. And it's just my favorite thing in the world. And it was only watching Twin Peaks back in my hometown that I viewed my hometown through this completely different lens for the first time. And I realized that it was basically my very own little Twin Peaks and just the perfect little murder town. So that was how I went, right, how can I Twin Peaksify Kiama? And that was sort of the catalyst for it. And I knew that I'd need to find my version of Laura Palmer, who is the main victim in Twin Peaks, and the person who, is the heart of the series and really sets all these circumstances in momentum. And yeah, obviously Laura Palmer is a prom queen, and Kiama is a town in Australia, so she couldn't be a prom queen. So I was going, oh, well, what would be her equivalent? And then straight away, it was just so obvious that she'd be a showgirl, because the Kiama show is this hugely important date on the town's calendar. And it's something that I have such fond memories of, which I suppose makes it quite strange that I've transformed it into this really horrible, horrifying thing of, staging this terrible murder there.
I do really love the sense of something evil lurking behind kind of the cozy, cute facade of small towns in Australia. I think that's very alluring. And I heard that there were actually some kind of local urban legends and folklore that inspired you for the book. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, that's been something that's been really, really interesting, and even more interesting since the book has been published. So I grew up hearing these rumors and urban legends that at the time, I think I sort of assumed that they were just sort of stories that parents in the town told kids to keep us out of the rainforest because it's quite a dangerous and treacherous area, you know, without anything nefarious lurking there, just generally. And so I had heard things about, you know, these dark and twisted things happening in the rainforest, and not to go in there, and that, you know, people would get you, and that it was a very dangerous place. And it wasn't until I moved away from Kiama that I discovered that those rumors seem to have a life of their own outside of the town. And even now, if you Google, say, Saddleback Mountain, which is where a lot of the book is set, if you Google Saddleback Mountain and satanic, it'll come up on bushwalking forums and stuff like that, that people have seen everything from symbols carved into trees to blood and animal sacrifices and that sort of thing. And that very closely aligns with what I heard growing up. And then the one that was really, really shocking was that quite a few years ago, I was sitting in my apartment. I was waiting for Q&A to come on. So Media Watch was on in the background, and I was sort of distractedly doing something on my phone or something like that. And suddenly they were talking about this person who claimed to have been hunted in the rainforest in Kiama. So that was the thing to be, you know, I pricked up my ears at this, you know, mention of cults and, you know, children being hunted, because that's fascinating, terrifying, but fascinating. But then to hear your hometown referenced, that was just mind-boggling to me. And when I heard that, even back then, you know, this was years and years before Catch Us the Foxes was ever a thing, but it really sparked something in my mind. I think it's really important to note, though, that the reason that was on Media Watch is because the claims were by a noted conspiracy theorist. And the whole point of it being on Media Watch was to say, you know, maybe these publications shouldn't have published this person's claims because they're very outlandish and very, like, completely unverified or anything like that. But no, it definitely set something off. And once again, it sort of like aligned with the rumors and the urban legends that I had heard. And then more recently, since the book has come out, just the other week, I had somebody who I grew up with in Kiama. She's the same age as me, went to the same school, and she read the book, and she was like, I don't think, I haven't told anybody this, so I don't know how you know about it. But when I was a kid, I have this very distinct memory of my family and I coming back from Jamboree to their house in Kiama, which would have been them coming back via Saddleback Mountain. And she said it was late at night, and somebody was burning a huge cross on the side of the mountain. And she was like, how do you know about this? Like, what do you know? And I was like, I don't know anything. This is all based on, you know, these rumors and like urban legends that I heard. And I, you know, she swears blind that it happened. And she brought it up with her parents, and they remember it happening as well. And obviously with the burning cross, it becomes, you know, hugely problematic, and it's a bit clansy and strange. But yeah, hearing that, it's made me go from, you know, I'm writing my fun little murder book that's just based on urban legends and stuff like that, to suddenly being like, oh God, you know, this is there some truth to this? And I'm not too worried because I live in Sydney now, but both my parents still live in the town, so I feel a bit bad for them.
They're not safe. That is so eerie. That is so, I've got chills, especially the Media Watch, just having your ears prick up at the sound of hearing your hometown. And so I did want to chat to you about your decision to leave in the town's real name and to not think of a fictional name. How is that going down with the locals?
It's really been interesting. I've previously been saying in these events and that sort of thing and interviews, you know, oh, you'll have to ask them. But it has been fortunate that more people have read the book, and I am getting messages every day from people in Kiama who have heard about the controversy of me choosing to name the town, and them saying, oh, I don't have an issue with it at all, which makes me feel a lot better. But I have been really, really bewildered that a lot of people have said that they don't think it was right and that it was a stupid decision and that sort of thing. But I haven't had a single person from Kiama. That's the thing. I think that if somebody from Kiama, particularly somebody who was involved in, say, the Show Society or something like that, came up to me and said, hey, this wasn't the right thing to do. This made us very uncomfortable. You shouldn't have done that. I would empathize with them 100% and apologize to them wholeheartedly. But the people who have said, you know, this is inappropriate or she shouldn't have done this, it's been people who are not connected to the town at all. And admittedly, it's people who, you know, perhaps they've spent 2 weeks there as a child and they have very, very, very fond memories of the town. But I've just found it really strange. And because a lot of that came out in sort of like the pre-launch to the book, so when ARCs and stuff like that were going out, it made me very nervous about how Kiama was going to react to it. But so far, everybody seems to be relatively supportive, which has been nice. But ultimately, the decision, I know that it can seem like, oh, did she do it to try and drum up controversy or anything like that? But it just, I can 100% tell you that both myself and Simon & Schuster never thought it was going to be an issue whatsoever, and were quite shocked by some of the backlash. But for me, it's always been, and it sounds so messed up, obviously, given the content of the book, but it is a love letter to the town. And for me, the catalyst behind it was that I'm fascinated by, so Picnic at Hanging Rock is one of my all-time favorite stories, both the novel and the film. And I just love the way that took this real world location and turned it into a thing of legend. And so I wanted to achieve that same thing with my own town, because Kiama is so visually distinct. It's very much like Hanging Rock, where it can feel grand and like bigger than the sum of its parts. Like it has this very prehistoric vibe, in that, you know, Saddleback Mountain is this former volcano, and it sort of formed the town and formed the Blowhole and all the stuff that makes the town iconic. So it really was about taking this real world place and turning it into fiction and this thing of legend. But yeah, it genuinely wasn't my intention to upset anyone.
That's so interesting hearing how divisive it's been.
Yes.
And that does kind of bring me into my next question. So there's this specific scene that kind of stuck in my mind, and that's when Marlowe, who's our protagonist, she meets a shady figure in the middle of the night, and I think it's by the lighthouse, and there's this terrifying blowhole. And it really contributes to the kind of the high drama of the scene. And then I wondered, is that blowhole real, and is it as terrifying in real life as it is in the
yes book? The blowhole is real. It's not as terrifying in real life. It's actually really, really beautiful and really, really cool. It's sort of like our most iconic tourist attraction with Kiama, and I think that was the biggest thing, that I'm not really a person who is backwards in coming forwards. And because I knew that I wanted to base so much stuff on the real landscape of Kiama and using something like the blowhole, yes, it would have been very, very easy for me to just give the town a fictional name. But using stuff like the blowhole, or this, you know, mountain that used to be a volcano and is now, you know, covered in subtropical rainforest, like, I don't think there's a single place. Well, there isn't. There's only a handful of blowholes in the country. It could have only been Kiama. So to me, it felt like a bit of, if I had made the decision to just give the town a fake name, it would have felt, I don't know, like a bit of a cop-out. I don't know. People may disagree with that and may say, no, you definitely should have done that. But for me, that was, yeah, because so much of the book is based on, that's the thing, literally every single location in the book is a real location that you could go to tomorrow if lockdown didn't exist.
I think, yeah, what's so evident is how rooted the story is in the setting itself and how it really contributes to the atmosphere. And next, I wanted to chat to our protagonist, who is Marlowe, who we call Lo for short. I wondered if you could introduce us to Lo and tell us what point she's at when we meet her and what does she want from life?
Okay, so we meet Marlowe on the, well, it's a bit complicated because the book is, at the beginning, it is a prologue, and the prologue is Marlowe 7 years after the death of Lily Williams. And she is on the main stage at the Opera House's concert hall, and she is talking to a sold out audience about her book, The Showgirl's Secret, which is the book inside this book, which is a bit complicated, but I promise it makes sense when you're actually reading it. So what we're reading for the majority of the book is actually Marlowe's book, which is her true crime memoir about her making this gruesome discovery at the town show. So when we very first meet her on the Opera House stage, this is her 7 years later, and this is her older and wiser and shaped by what happened to her 7 years ago. But when we go into the bulk of the novel, which is her 7 years earlier in 2008, she is tenacious, she is driven, and the only thing she wants out of life is to get out of the town of Kiama, and she is willing to do everything it takes to achieve that. So that is why, for perhaps a less tenacious person, them finding the body of their former childhood friend would perhaps be quite confronting and quite traumatizing. She instead sees it as her opportunity to get out of the town and to make a name for herself as a journalist.
I really liked Marlowe, but I think she will be a little bit of a divisive character. She is audacious, stubborn, smart, sometimes blinkered, and totally unpredictable. So she's very complex. And I think that's something that's often overlooked in thrillers who opt for pure plot over actual character development. And as we spoke about, the book does draw inspiration from parts of your own life. And just like you, she is an ambitious young journalist from a small town in New South Wales. And I wondered, when you were writing, was it hard to separate yourself from Marlowe, and what ways are you similar?
It's always been interesting that I've never really seen myself in Marlowe, more to the point that she was the person I thought I needed to become in order to escape that town. And it sounds horrible given how, morally dubious she is, but I think that she was sort of the perfect version of myself, at least back at that age. And that really comes from the fact that because of these health issues, I was physically trapped in the town. So I ended up developing a neurological condition from a treatment that I had to have for my gynecological problems. And it caused a herniation in my brain and raised intracranial pressure. And it got to the stage where I had to have therapeutic lumbar punctures, first daily, then weekly, then fortnightly for 2.5 years. And that was horrific, but it also meant that I couldn't move away. This happened when I was 19, and I was supposed to move away to Sydney to start an internship as a journalist, and I had that all locked in, and I was getting out of the town and everything was all lined up for me. And then I developed this condition and I was trapped, and I was physically trapped as well because of the condition. I couldn't even get on a plane or anything like that because of the pressure in the cabin. So I just can't articulate how trapped I felt in the town. And I think that Marlowe is really the answer to that. So in that sense, she's not necessarily me. And I didn't have too much trouble, making distinctions between the two of us, because I could sort of see her as this idealized version of me, more so than, this part of me. So Yeah, there are some similarities there, but she is me turned up to a million.
Yes, she's certainly, yeah, audacious. And now I don't want to give away too much about the other characters, because I do like how we're kind of gradually introduced to them and we do suspect everyone from the get-go what their motives are. But I do want to talk about Lily. So Lily is our murdered showgirl. And Lily's actually Marlowe's best friend, but their relationship is quite strained. We see that Marlowe is kind of grappling with grieving her friend's death, but then also seeing it as a journalistic opportunity. So can you tell us about the state of Lily and Marlowe's relationship?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that in the same way that I say that Marlowe was the perfect version of me when I was sort of in my late teens and early 20s, I think that Lily was the perfect version of me as a child and in my early teens, in the sense that she was just that person. She was perfect. She was that person who was perfect, at least, you know, on the surface. She was a person who seemed to have a really charmed life and everybody liked her, and that, you know, she was just everything to everybody, which I think is impossible in reality, that you can't be that. And that was the person that I wanted to be when I was younger. I was a person who was very much, you know, interested in what people thought of me, and trying to keep everybody happy, when that's virtually impossible. If you're trying to keep, you know, your friends happy and your teachers happy and your parents happy and that sort of thing, like it's kind of impossible to do all at the same time. But I liked that difference between Lily and Marlowe. And yeah, it's very interesting, the point that we meet Marlowe, given her relationship with Lily, because they were very, very close when they were young. But Marlowe's mum died, and just through circumstances, you know, the two families ended up splitting away from each other. So it's sort of interesting. And I can't think of somebody specific, and there's nobody that this was based on at all, but I do think that you can have somebody who, especially at that very young age, sort of like primary school or younger, that you're best friends with them, and you know that they're completely part of your life, but then just through circumstances, you end up drifting apart, but you know that you have so much history together. But in the same time, you know, you're not really, you're very different people, so you can't really be friends with them when you're older, because you're just two completely different people. But there's still this connection there that I don't think that you can escape. And I think that that's something that was interesting to explore. But yeah, I can't imagine what it would feel like to have one of those friends that, even, you know, if you had sort of fallen out of the way, to suddenly find their body. So that was something that I found really, really interesting to explore. And then on top of that, you do have the element that both Marlowe and Lily, they were in constant competition with each other. They both worked at the same paper and that sort of thing. And, you know, they were both doing the same uni course. So I think that, especially with somebody as tenacious and as driven as Marlowe, that was another element that sort of added to that dynamic and made things a bit unnerving, because I do think that her reaction to finding Lily's body is unnerving. It's certainly not normal.
I think Marlowe does have a lot of love for Lily that's, you know, rooted in their childhood friendship, but you can also see that there is a little bit of resentment there for Lily being that perfect girl, and like you were saying, things that are almost unattainable, that Marlowe does have a bit of resentment. And you were just talking about Marlowe finding Lily's body. And so this doesn't give away anything, but I wanted to chat about the symbols of the interconnecting circles. So Lo discovers etched into Lily's lower back these circles when she finds her at the showgrounds. Where did that idea come from, of this symbology?
Yeah, well, very early on obviously I had my Twin Peaks inspiration, and one of the things that Twin Peaks does so well is the iconography of the show. Like if you watch the show, there are some very specific elements that you think about. You think of the chevron in the red room, and you think of Laura Palmer's prom photo, and her friendship necklace, and there's all this stuff that really stands out visually. And another show that I really loved that I thought handled that really well was the first season of True Detective, where had the antlers, and this spiral symbol kept coming up. And so I knew that when I was creating my own world, that I wanted to have these very iconic this iconic visual through line that was very easy to identify, and just helped with the world building. So one of the elements is this fox mask, but the specific element that you're talking about is this series of 7 interconnecting circles, which I'm not sure if my camera can pick it up, but that's what it looks like. And that actually came from, once again, me, consuming something several years before I even started writing the book. And it was a Guardian article on these things called witches' marks. And I suppose the best way to describe them is like an evil eye, but instead of keeping away evil spirits, they're supposed to keep away witches. And the article was saying that, you can find them in very old houses in places all over the world, Australia, the UK, America. And it's this symbol, but it's carved into like door frames, so carved into wood and stone and stuff like that. And it was just this very striking symbol that, I'd sort of fallen in love with and had bookmarked away just for, just because I bookmark weird things that I like, never knowing or intending to ever write this book. But when I was thinking, hey, I want this very symbolic thing, I was just fortunate that I still somehow remembered it even all those years later and went, oh wait, that's perfect. So yeah, but once again, it's this very beautiful thing, the symbol. It's called the seed of life, and it's part of sacred geometry. And yeah, it's beautiful, but I've turned it into this rather horrifying thing once again.
I was also wondering if you could tell us about the book's title as well, Catch Us the Foxes. That's one of the things when I first saw, this is the advanced reading copy that looks a little bit different to the final version that you have, the title as well. And you can't actually maybe see on the cameras, but you can see all the interconnecting circles on the page here. And that's what drew me in straight away. And I just thought, would you be able to tell us a little bit about the title, Catch Us the Foxes, and then also the fox imagery throughout the story?
Yeah, so that was, once again, that came from the fox imagery specifically, in that it's a Bible verse. It's from the Song of Solomon, and it is, catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. And it just so happened that once again, in my sort of like bank of imagery that I'd stored up, I previously worked as a fashion journalist, and I'm fascinated by couture animal ears and masks and headbands and stuff like that. And I used to collect them for a while. And there was this one by a leather brand called Fleet Ilya. And it was just this beautiful leather fox mask that had these very long ears and this long pointed snout. And the snout could be unclipped, so the bottom of your face was revealed and it was just covering your eyes. And I just fell in love with it and wanted to buy it, but it was very expensive and I could never justify it on my fashion journalist wage. But yeah, it literally was me going, oh, if I'm writing this sort of creepy culty book, it's got to be that mask. So from there, I sort of was searching for anything that was symbolic of foxes. And, obviously one element was fox hunting, which took me back to the Q&A episode. But another thing that I found was this Song of Solomon verse, and just absolutely fell in love with it and thought that it was really, really beautiful. And once again, something that is on paper, it's a beautiful verse and it's talking about beautiful things, but I've twisted it into this absolutely just heinous thing. But yeah, it was interesting that when I wrote the book and when I was submitting the book, I never thought that it would be the name that it ended up with if it ended up being published. I always thought that a publisher would say, no, it's too weird, it's too literary. Because if you look at, you know, the vast majority of psychological thrillers or crime novels that are out, you know, they have quite simplistic names, and I don't have an issue with that at all. But no, I was really, really fortunate that Simon and Schuster seemed to love it as much as I did and thought that it gave it a bit of a point of difference. So yeah.
And as I said, that the cover of even the advanced reading copy drew me in, but then I want to talk about the final cover, which you have. I think it's stunning, it's moody, and I think it perfectly captures the atmosphere of the story. And I wondered, did you have any input to the design?
Yeah, I was really, really fortunate that Simon and Schuster, they're just amazing. Like genuinely, they're just so amazing. I'm so thankful for everything they've done for me. But they allowed me to be involved in every avenue of the publishing process, which was just incredible. And one of the ones that I was most excited about was the cover design. And I was just so fortunate that not only did Simon and Schuster allow me to have input into it, but that the cover's designer, who is the phenomenal Sandy Cull, she was just so generous with sharing her process, and, you know, so open to feedback and so open to collaboration is, that's not the right word for it, because it's all Sandy. Sandy is just so amazing at what she does, and you know, this was all from her mind. But yeah, at a very early stage, Simon and Schuster were like, oh, do you want to, you know, send through some imagery that you like or anything like that? And I got to send through so many photos and photographers that I loved and stuff like that. And Sandy really took it on board and used it to inform the design process. And one of the things that I just find quite sad about the process is that I'm thrilled with what we ended up with, but there are so many incredible covers out there that you guys will never see. And I wish that we could release every single one, because Sandy truly knocked every last one out of the park, and every last one could have been the cover.
I totally agree. And I think that the cover, that I would love to see the other ones, but I think the one that you settled on is stunning. And I think it's so nice to hear, because I've heard several stories where authors either have no input or they don't even see it till it's published. But it's great to hear that Simon and Schuster allowed you to really be a part of that process. Next, I thought we would do a little reading, just a couple of paragraphs, because I really love the beginning of chapter 4. And I think that gives a really good excerpt of the strength of your writing and just how eerie it is. Would you mind just up until the end of the page, I think?
Yep. I will just warn everybody, because I've been in lockdown for the entirety of this. This will be my first reading. So this is quite confronting, but and also have a really dry mouth from some medication that I'm on. So I am going to have a little sip, but apologies in advance. Lily looked shocked by her own death, those polychromatic eyes frozen in surprise, her lips parted as if gasping at a particularly scandalous secret. But beneath her flower crown and halo of golden hair, a pool of blood had blossomed. She was lying on her side, in the fetal position, with one arm outstretched as if she was reaching towards something or someone unseen. Her matching lace top and skirt were still a pristine white, both seemingly spared from the blood that had slowly drained from the deep wound on her temple. Had her head not been resting in the gelatinous red pool, I may have never even noticed the injury, hidden beneath her curls. It struck me as fitting that, even in death, she inspired awe. The whole scene seemed staged. It was too perfect, too pretty, a meticulously constructed tableau. I'd seen bodies before, though never in real life. My dad had a nasty habit of leaving open copies of the police journal lying around the house, on the kitchen counter, the dining room table, or next to the toilet. As a child, I was never quite sure when or where I'd inadvertently catch my next glimpse of a corpse. I grew desensitized to the bodies and eventually became fascinated by the articles behind the pictures. It was one of the main reasons I aspired to be a crime reporter. One person's early childhood trauma is another's career catalyst.
I love that opening. And I have a feeling that the scene of Marlowe's dad, or maybe your dad, leaving the gory police journals out might be true, because your dad is a police officer. And I wondered, how involved was he in your kind of research into the police procedural side of Catch Us the Foxes?
Before we blame my dad too much, yes, that story is from my own childhood. And yes, there were copies of the police journal left out in my house. And on a quite regular basis, I was exposed to the most horrifying crime scene photos you could ever imagine. But I have since found out through me talking about this during publicity that my dad is not to blame. And it was my mum who was leaving the police journal lying out in the house. So apologies, Dad. I've been blaming you for a very long time. But no, it was actually my mum who isn't apologetic at all, because she's like, well, you know, it's like you said in your book, you're a crime writer because of this.
And also the line of one person's childhood trauma is another's career catalyst. So your mum traumatized you, but now you're an author.
Yeah, very apt. Yeah, it could have gone either way, you know, it could have been traumatized from a, you know, going inside myself, or could have been traumatized from like a serial killer perspective. But fortunately, I'm channeling it all into my fiction. But no, I was really, really fortunate to have this asset that was my dad, to be able to talk about the job and the procedural aspect of things. And I think it's important to note that Catch Us the Foxes isn't really a procedural, because, you know, it's obviously this young journalist who doesn't, you know, she has exposure via her dad, but it's not a traditional police procedural. But it was still really, really good to be able to just have this person to ask every single dumb, annoying question to, and know that, you know, he wouldn't get angry at you. You know, my dad loves talking about himself and the job. So yeah, it was actually like a really nice bonding experience. And I can remember, it may have been when my apartment flooded, but I had this, you know, 2-hour car trip from Kiama back to Sydney. And I just got to sit with my dad and say, what would happen if I found a body in the stables at the Kiama show? Walk me through every single thing that you would do. And that was just eye-opening. And there was so much stuff that, even as a policeman's daughter who had been exposed to so much, there was so much stuff that I would say, but what about this? And he'd go, oh, you know, you watch too much TV, it doesn't work like that. So yeah, that was really lovely to have him, yeah, just to ask the dumbest questions in the world and not feel like you were being intrusive or annoying or anything like that. So yeah, I'm really, really thankful to him for that.
Yeah, I think there's a scene where Marla goes, do you need my shoes for the crime? No.
No, that was literally based on the conversation that I had with my dad of me saying, you know, oh, but you'd need my shoes, you know, to match it with the, you know, footprints in the pine needles and stuff like that. And he's like, no, you would have just found her, not like, that's not how it works. You watch too much TV. And me just being like, oh, okay.
In the book as well, Marlowe, she's written a thesis and she has become pen pals with serial killer Ivan Milat. You also did your own research into Ivan, and were you pen pals with him?
I was, which is horrifying to admit now. But yeah, for my year 12 major work for history extension, I wrote to him for that. And I think it's important to add that I did not think he would reply. I did not in a million years think he would reply. As I said, you know, I share some similarities with Marlowe, and one of them was that I was very, very ambitious and I was a teacher's pet, and, you know, I wanted to get good marks. And, you know, this assignment was worth 50% of the final grade, and you had to have this journal basically documenting everything, and so much of it was just padding that journal as much as you could. So of course I was like, oh, I'm just gonna, you know, email Ivan Milat, not email, write to Ivan Milat, and just to pad this journal. So I was so shocked to get a reply from him. And then I was further shocked when I ended up writing back to him, and then the prison sent me a letter and returned my letter and said, we can't do this, we absolutely cannot do this. And I was sort of saying, well, you already did, you know, what's the issue? Please, please, please. And they ended up sending me back a letter saying that they couldn't pass it on because he was deemed a high risk of escape, and that providing him access to me could be detrimental to everyone involved.
Wow.
Which basically meant that he could break out and come down and murder me, which, saying that now and reading that back now, which I had to get my parents to dig out all the correspondence while I've been doing the promotion for this book, and reading that now, I was just so shocked and look at it and go, how was I not terrified? But at the time, the only thing I can remember was just being furious. I was so angry at them and taking this opportunity away from me and thinking that it was going to ruin my assignment because I was just so stubborn and so ridiculous. But I'm proud to say that not only did I not get murdered, I was also the first person in my school's history to score perfect marks for that assignment. So it was worth it in the end.
Wow. Good job on the assignment. That is terrifying. Whoa. I remember in high school, I think I tweeted Kevin Rudd when he was Prime Minister, and he responded, and I thought that was a big deal. But Ivan Milat is next level. And now we will go to questions soon. But I did want to ask, because we always have a few budding writers in the crowd, and who always love to know authors' approach to writing. So when it came to plotting Catch Us the Foxes, did you have a solid plot laid out, or did you kind of have an idea and see where the twists and turns took you and worked it along the way?
Yep, I'm sure if anybody is an aspiring author, that they know about the difference between plotters and pantsers. And plotters are people who sit down, plot everything out, and pantsers are people who fly by the seat of their pants. I am 100% in the former category. I can't even imagine being a pantser. I'm sure it's quite a fun way to write, but I think for crime, and particularly twisty crime, I just can't imagine how you could sit down and do that without having everything planned out. But no, I'm 100% a plotter, and I'm a plotter to the extent that I have everything figured out before I sit down to type a single sentence. You know, I had every single twist and turn planned before I literally wrote a single word. So that's my process. Some people might think that that's a bit too regimented and that sort of thing, but it works for me, and it's what I've continued to use, and yeah, it definitely fits me the best. And I think maybe that's why I prefer the novel writing to the memoir writing, because it's having that level of control over it. Whereas with the memoir writing, it was sort of just, you know, sitting down and like, oh, writing about your memories and stuff like that. Whereas, yeah, I do feel a real sense of control over fiction.
And I think your planning and kind of detail is really evident in your world building as well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
That's all right. I'll just go to Bianca to see if we have any questions from the audience, because I could just chat, but we'll see if anyone has a question.
We do have lots of questions. Yeah, so we'll see what we can get through in the final 10 minutes. Patches of the questions have been answered as well due to your brilliant question at the end for the writers. Thanks, Yana. So there are a little bit more that go into the nitty gritty and whatnot. But the first question that came through was from Poppy. And she said, as someone who isn't familiar with Twin Peaks, you mentioned, you know, Murder Town and something about it being alluring and maybe one of the main characters. But just quickly, Nicola, was there something that was specifically that that fascinated you about Twin Peaks in terms of inspiration for the book?
That is so difficult to answer because Twin Peaks is the weirdest television show potentially in history. And I think that that is the reason that I love it so much. It is so strange. It was so ahead of its time. And they're especially, you know, for the original series in the 90s, there was nothing like it on TV. And I talk about it like, oh, I watched it back then. No, I was 1, I think, when it came out. You know, I'm a late adopter. But yeah, it's basically, it has all those great elements of small town murder mystery where everybody is hiding a secret. Everybody's a bit weird. A bit weird is an understatement, to be honest. Everybody's very, very weird. And then it has these greater, very strange, potentially supernatural, which isn't anything that Catches the Foxes gets into, but is by David Lynch. So if you've watched any of his films, I think that sort of sums up what it's like. And if you haven't watched it, I wholeheartedly recommend it. It really is the best show on television.
Yep. Yeah, I can definitely tell already why it might have gained its cult following and a bit of a label there. And I love how books, when they come out, sort of you see a surge in something that might be related to them, such as, you know, television show and vice versa. So another person has asked, sorry, there's just a few different questions that have been covered. Well, you've shared with us briefly in our pre-Zoom about the productive lockdown writing that you've been doing. Could you tell us anything about your next project at all, Nicola?
Yeah, to those who don't know, I'm severely immunocompromised and I've only left my apartment twice in almost 17 months, and both those times were to get my vaccine. So it's been a very, very strange time, but it's been a very productive time in the sense that I have had literally nothing else to do. So I have finished 2 novels since lockdown, well, since, you know, COVID began. So yeah, if everything goes to plan, around this time next year, hopefully you will see a new novel from me, and hopefully even more further down the track.
Wonderful. Is that continuing in sort of like a thriller sort of vein of things with crime or procedural? Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely in the same category. I don't think I can say too much about them, but no, I think if people like Catches the Foxes, they will like these ones as well.
Wonderful. Great. Now, a little bit of a process question. How do you schedule your day in terms of your writing, and how long did the book take to write?
I'm not great with scheduling, and I'm a person who I write quite quickly. So Catches the Foxes took about 18 months, but I was studying at uni as well at the time and doing freelance writing and stuff like that. Whereas with these new books, where I've had literally nothing else to do and no other responsibilities, I was able to complete these very, very quickly. So yeah, around 4 months. So for both of them, which is very, very intense, but yeah, was in lockdown, live alone, didn't have any responsibilities basically. So I know that is not a writing routine that very many people can take, you know, practice, because that's not how the world works for the vast majority of people. But for me, it's about consistency. And I think you'd just be amazed how quickly you can finish something if you are just doing a set amount of days, a set amount of words every single day, and building that routine and being consistent. Especially when I had nothing else to sort of tell me that time was passing or anything like that. Words on a page, it's amazing how quickly they add up.
Absolutely. Yep. I'm sure that's reflected in the pacing of the novel as well, or the novels to come. So this is a fun question. Sarah in the audience has asked, how would you describe the book? Twin Peaks crossed with, have you sort of thought about two kind of titles that would be a cross for the book in the, I guess, the publicity of it?
Well, part of the publicity that Simon & Schuster has used, and other people have used this comparison as well, has been Twin Peaks meets The Dry, which I do think that is quite an apt, it's obviously a very, very complimentary comparison, and I'm very, very flattered. Yeah, but that's probably, I think that is also basically saying Australian Twin Peaks. So I think that comparison, yeah, it does make sense. It's also a bit, I would say, Gillian Flynn's Sharp Objects as well. There's quite a few similarities with there, and I love the way that she has her protagonists, her female protagonists in particular, they're not necessarily the most likable people in the world, and they're kind of unapologetically themselves, even if that is a bad thing. And that's something that I was really interested in exploring, because it's something that I enjoy reading myself.
So another question came through, and I'm not sure if you've heard this comparison as well, but Catherine says, I haven't read the book, but one review I came across said it was the scariest book since Silence of the Lambs. Any comments on this?
I will say that was one of my favorite reviews I read. I am a huge Hannibal fan, so that was such a wonderful compliment. But I also felt very, very bad, because I do know the person who left that review was genuinely very scared of the book and had nightmares about it. So I feel quite bad. Yep.
So good to know you're aware of that, and maybe that could be sort of a trio on The Dry and Twin Peaks as well. So Greg Woodland, so yes, another fellow writer, says, congratulations, Nicola, I can't wait to read it. I'm wondering, at the same time, you had to lean on research outside of your life experiences, or even that of your dad's experience. So I think what he's saying there. Okay, so I guess what research was, outside of your immediate experience or your dad's being a police officer?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the reasons that I did lean quite heavily on that, because just as a debut author, I think that's something that a lot of writers do to, write what's familiar. But as far as the research, it's quite embarrassing to admit, but I never really sat down to say, like, I am researching this right now. It in the same way that I told you about The Seed of Life, or this Fox Mass and the Song of Solomon and stuff like that. It was less about me doing intentional research for this book and me plumbing the depths of things that I was already interested in. So I had a just huge fascination with cults and a huge fascination with satanic panic. And those were topics that I had researched extensively, but admittedly not for any book, just because I'm a bit weird. And that was how I chose to spend my time for some reason. Thankfully, it paid off, but at the time I was just doing it for fun.
I love that. Yeah, sometimes we do a huge volume of research, and then the amount we absorb and actually comes through is surprising as well, even if it's not, I guess, not consciously aware of it. So I think we have time for one more question, if that's okay. So the question is, what is more fun, Nicola, plotting out the plot or writing the story once the plot is done?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, I'm going to give a bit of a wishy-washy answer. So there's two parts of it, of each, that I really, really like. So I adore the world building, which is the plotting. And it's basically like dreaming while awake, which is daydreaming. Sorry, but it's when you are just, world building, creating this world, seeing these characters come alive, in your head. That is so, so much fun. But I would say that the most satisfying part of the writing process is when you are writing it. And even despite how much I do plot stuff out, suddenly you could be writing something and your brain will make a connection between two seemingly separate things, and you'll realize, oh, I can actually link that and make that an additional twist or an additional red herring or something like that. And I think there's nothing more satisfying than when those moments click in your head. So I think that the world building is more fun, but the writing is more satisfying.
So that's all we have for our questions, but that leaves us right on time to finish as well. So I will just thank you so much to everyone for sending through your questions. And I know that I've been wildly riveted and entertained by the conversation tonight, as I'm sure everyone has been. I'll pass it back to Nicola, Jana, if you have any final comments or whatnot before we let everyone into the room to give a round of applause.
Yeah, actually, I have one question that I didn't get to that I've been dying to ask. And it is, if Catches the Foxes was ever adapted for the screen, either small or big, who do you see playing Marlowe?
I don't have an answer to that question. And it's a question I keep being asked. And I picture her so distinctly in my head that it's gotten to the stage where I can't cast her, because she's her own beast. She became my sleep paralysis demon for a while. Like, I have nightmares about her. So she is, as close to real as can be, which is terrifying.
It's one of those things too, when you have sort of I guess almost an image of who the image on the front cover of the book, is that meant to represent Marlowe, or is that meant to represent Lily?
No, that's meant to represent Lily. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
She has the heterochromia. Yeah.
Almost had the picture of
sorry.
Oh,
sorry, Bianca. I was just going to say a big thank you to Nicola, and thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. As I said before, Catch Us the Foxes, I think, is one of the strongest debuts of the year. I devoured it and I would recommend it to anyone. Bianca has linked to purchase it at Avid Reader, but also if you're in New South Wales or even Melbourne, purchase from your local lockdown bookstore as well.
Fantastic. Yes, so just reiterating, thank you so much again, Nicola, Jana, for your time this evening, and everyone. I think if you can go out and get the book or order it online from your either Avid Reader or your local indie bookshop, and keep supporting your indie and small businesses. We certainly appreciate it, and because we love what we do, and we're really excited to be able to bring more events to you as well. Keep a lookout for Avid Readers events. Some will be going online, and also you can catch up on the YouTube channel as well, just Avid Reader. So I will let everyone unmute, and we can join in thanking our author and in conversation partner, Nicola and Jana, this evening. So go there, and we'll have a big round of applause, and congratulations again on this book.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody coming out. I hope that it was a nice little break from everybody's lockdowns. Thank you so much.
It was. Thank you.
Thank you.
Most definitely.
Congratulations, Nicola.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely evening. Great to meet you, Nicola.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
Nicola.
Bye.
Oh, did you turn it off? Yeah, I hit it.